We're gonna. I'm going to go ahead and gavel us in so that we can give our opening statements, and hopefully we can get through some of the testimony while we're here. But we're going to have to break for votes, which will be called anywhere probably in the next 15 minutes. And so then we'll break, we'll go vote, and then we'll try to rush back as quickly as possible to be respectful of your time, because we're certainly glad that you're here. So I'll start off, and then I'll turn it over to Ranking Member Katko. So let me just start by saying good afternoon. I want to welcome the panelists to today's hearing on growing and diversifying the cyber talent pipeline. When I became ranking member of this subcommittee in 2015, researchers were projecting that the shortage of cybersecurity professionals would reach 1.5 million by 2020. In 2018, that research showed a current day shortage of nearly 3 million unfilled positions around the world and over 300,000 in the United States alone. That means that nearly a third of the U.S. cybersecurity workforce is, at this point, an empty desk. Nevertheless, every day we introduce newer, smarter, more connected devices and infrastructure to make our lives easier, our businesses more profitable, and countless other goals. And every day we learn new ways these devices can be hacked, disrupted, or manipulated to cause everything from minor inconveniences to major global havoc. We have seen ransomware attacks take out entire branches of local government. We have had our personal data, intellectual property, and military secrets stolen by hostile foreign governments. It has never been more clear we need more people at the table who know cybersecurity. And we must do more than admire the problem. This subcommittee held 3 cyber workforce hearings last Congress and learned something in all of them. Now that I have the gavel, I want to use it to drive home an important point. Diversity is essential for national security and for cybersecurity. We need to bring people to the table who have different perspectives, different experiences, and different ways of looking at a problem. Right now, the vast majority of cybersecurity workforce is white and male. Only 9% are African American, 4% are Hispanic, and 11% are women. My concern is that having such a homogeneous workforce could lead to blind spots and potentially intelligence failures, particularly for federal agencies like the Department of Homeland Security. I know we have some panelists here today that can speak to these issues directly, and I look forward to hearing your perspectives. Despite the good work being done in the public and private sector on cyber workforce, here's what I know for sure. We still are not tapping into diverse talent streams. If we are serious about fixing this problem, we need to put our money where our mouth is. We have to stop starving the federal programs that support cyber talent, such as the National Science Foundation's Cyber Corps Scholarship for Service, whose budget is on the chopping block every year. We also need to stop bleeding talent at the very agencies who need cyber experts to carry out their missions, like DHS, the FBI, and the National Security Council at the White House. And finally, we have to move the conversation around diversity out of the background and put it in the front and center. We cannot continue to make diversity an afterthought and expect that it will spring forth naturally. A few weeks ago, the White House issued an executive order on America's cybersecurity workforce. It introduced a President's Cup cyber competition and some workforce rotation opportunities, which are good, but was mostly silent on diversity. Officials reportedly explained that they hoped diversity would be a natural byproduct of the order. That is exactly the type of thinking we cannot afford to have if we are serious about reversing trends. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about opportunities to address this important national security issue. With that, I will yield to the ranking member, Mr. Katko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for today's hearing on the cybersecurity workforce. Excuse me. As I meet with those involved in cybersecurity, the common refrain from government, academia, and industry is a need for more people. As the chairman said, there's about 300,000 open positions in the cybersecurity field in the United States right now. How do we fix this? To start, we must begin engaging students in primary and secondary school. We can't wait until college to introduce cybersecurity as a profession. To that, we need more teachers that are cyber aware and curriculums that help inspire and encourage kids to engage with cybersecurity. For those that want to go to college, we need to make sure the programs are building the experience and knowledge that employers need. We also need to make sure we have professors to do that. I'm heartened that in my district, Lemoyne College is starting up a cybersecurity program this year, but we need a lot more than just one school doing that. Enabling programs that grant a range of students the opportunity to engage in cybersecurity scholarship should be a top priority. I recently discussed cybersecurity scholarship opportunities offered by the National Science Foundation through their CyberCorps program. By offering prospective students the opportunity to develop the critical skills in exchange for government service, we ensure that we have a highly skilled cybersecurity employees in the government while creating the next generation of cybersecurity experts. College is not the only pathway to a career in cyber. We need to not only develop and scale programs, but also need to increase the awareness of them. We need to provide opportunities to reskill those currently in the workforce who are interested in moving to a career in cyber. We must do more in the short term as well. I had the opportunity to talk with employees at Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency yesterday, or CISA. And a common theme among them was the challenges in hiring and then retaining skilled employees after they train them up. It is critical that we do more now to give CISA the tools that they need to more quickly bring on qualified personnel, particularly to join the Hunt and Incident Response Team, or HURT, and the National Cybersecurity Assessment and Technical Security Lab, or NCATS. The men and women in these offices are working around the clock to identify and mitigate cyber vulnerabilities in both the government domain and on behalf of the private sector, and they're expanding every day in those efforts. Over the past few years, Congress has given CISA significant new authorities to harden our cyber defenses, but we have to cut the red tape so they can hire faster and keep their personnel longer. There is no silver bullet to solve the problem, and the federal government cannot go it alone. It will take time, it will take effort, and it will take new ideas and collaboration. I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make a dent in the cyber workforce shortage. Thank you to our witnesses for speaking with us today. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back to balance my time.
I want to thank the ranking member, Mr. Katko from New York, for his opening statement, and remind members that other members of the subcommittee are reminded that under the committee rules, opening statements may be submitted for the record. Now I want to welcome our panel of witnesses. First, we have Mr. Wesley Simpson, the Chief Operating Officer for the International Information System Security Certification Consortium, better known as ISC Squared. ISC Squared is the world's largest IT security organization for cybersecurity professionals, and we rely heavily on the studies they produce and the data they use to track workforce trends in the United States and abroad. And I had the pleasure of speaking at their conference last year in New Orleans. Next, I would like to welcome my friend, former colleague in the Louisiana State House, former state senator, and President Rick Gallo of Grambling State University, HBCU in Louisiana that produces 40% of the state's African-American computer science graduates, and plans to begin offering a new bachelor's degree in cybersecurity this year. I hope he will tell us how we can build better partnerships to help the federal government leverage the talent coming out of minority-serving institutions like Grambling State University. We also have Dr. Amelia Eswick from the National Cybersecurity Initiative at Excelsior College. Dr. Eswick has spent her career on the front lines of this issue, first in the United States Army, then for 15 years at the National Security Agency, where she was a technical director for cyber threat operations. I look forward to hearing her unique perspective as a veteran, a former federal official, and in academia, where she's helping to educate the next generation of cybersecurity professionals. Finally, I would like to welcome Ms. Candace Worley, the Vice President and Chief Technical Strategist for McAfee, who will tell us about some of the good work being done in the private sector to grow and diversify the cyber talent pipeline. Without objection, the witnesses' full statements will be inserted to the record, and I will now ask each witness to summarize his or her statement in 5 minutes, beginning with Mr. Simpson.
Mr. Chairman and esteemed members of the committee, thank you for inviting me here today to testify on behalf of ISC Squared regarding the goal of a more inclusive and diverse cybersecurity workforce. My name is Wesley Simpson, and I am the Chief Operating Officer for ISC Squared, headquartered in the United States. ISC Squared is the world's largest nonprofit membership association of certified cybersecurity professionals. We function as an advocate for cybersecurity profession and as a training and certification body. Our certifications are approved by the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, which is the primary organization for fostering the development of technology standards in the United States. As part of our association's stated mission to inspire a safe and secure cyber world, we regularly commission market research on a host of relevant industry topics that help to inform our global base of more than 140,000 certified members across more than 170 countries, as well as influence policy discussions, corporate programs, and educational opportunities. In the course of doing so, we have issued research related to the size of the cybersecurity workforce gap since 2004. The state of the industry has changed quite a bit over that time, and ISC Squared is constantly identifying ways to improve its research methodology to keep up with the evolution of the marketplace. As part and parcel of the workforce research, we are in position to be able to identify the demographic makeup of the cybersecurity workforce as it changes, and I'm pleased to share some of those findings with you today, as well as some conclusions we might draw from them. Our recent round of workforce research was conducted in 2018, and it reveals a cybersecurity workforce shortage of 498,000 skilled professionals just in the United States, and 2.93 million globally. This points to a growing gap in the amount of cybersecurity staff that private sector and government bodies indicate they need to maintain optimal security in the amount of skilled professionals currently available. As a point of clarification, this is not meant to indicate that there are currently 1.5 million open or unfilled jobs. As we collectively explore ways in which the talent pool can be increased, it's important to recognize the clear underrepresentation of women in the cybersecurity workforce. While Department of Labor statistics indicate that women make up 47% of the overall U.S. labor force, our research shows that only constitutes 22% of U.S. cybersecurity staff and only 24% of the global staff. To be more specific, that figure includes anyone from whom at least 20% of their daily job tasks consists of security-related activities, not just those with cybersecurity titles. This expands our view to include those with IT roles, for example, who have some cybersecurity responsibilities. This change to our methodology was made in 2018 to more closely mirror the reality of how cybersecurity is executed around the ground levels, and more importantly, by who. We also found that pay inequity between genders remains an issue and is something that could affect a woman's decision to pursue a career in this field. If we can find ways to attract women to cybersecurity and make it a welcoming profession, we may be able to decrease the cybersecurity workforce gap to a large degree. There are more findings specifics to our 2019 Women in Cybersecurity report found in my written testimony. But I want to highlight the obvious underrepresentation as the key data point for our discussion here today. Another underrepresented group identified through our research is ethnic and racial minorities. Our 2018 study titled Innovation Through Inclusion, the Multicultural Cybersecurity Workforce, showed that just 26% of the U.S. cybersecurity workforce identifies as non-Caucasian. While this compares favorably to the Department of Labor statistics that shows only 22% of the overall U.S. labor force is made up of minorities, this is still a low ratio that could be improved by creating programs that specifically market the path to a cybersecurity career to a wider talent pool. Furthermore, employment among cybersecurity professionals who identify as racial or ethnic minorities tends to be concentrated in non-management positions, with fewer occupying leadership roles, despite being highly educated. And here as well, our research showed that an equity in pay exists. Despite higher levels of education, a cybersecurity professional of color earns less than their Caucasian counterparts on average. Under participation in cybersecurity by large segments of our potential workforce, be it women or minorities, represents a loss of opportunities for individuals and a loss of collective creativity in solving the problems we face in the field. Not only is this an issue of inequity, it is a threat to our global economic viability as a nation. The major opportunities as we see them are stronger, more focus on equal pay for women and minorities in cybersecurity, more advancement and leadership opportunities for deserving professionals, formalized mentorship programs to help unearth untapped potential and hidden talents, and more programs that expose young women and minorities to technical skills earlier in their educational lives. I thank you for your time today and look forward to answering any questions you may have to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. I now recognize Mr. Gallo to summarize his statement for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Richmond, Ranking Member Mr. Katko, and the distinguished members of the Homeland Security Subcommittee on Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection. On behalf of the team at Grambling State University, the University of Louisiana System, who's represented here by Dr. Jim Henderson, System President, and historically black colleges and universities across the United States of America, we sincerely appreciate this opportunity and coming opportunities to collaborate. As president of Grambling State University, I'm privileged to lead a campus community that includes more than 5,200 students and 550 staff and faculty, as well as students who represent 42 states and 27 foreign countries to help address Louisiana and the U.S. vital workforce needs for the past 118 years. Founded in 1901, our university is well known outside of the classroom for our historic football in Coach Eddie Robinson, our world-famed Tiger Marching Band, and as our motto being the place where everybody is somebody. In contrast, it is our innovation inside the classroom that is the true foundation for our legacy. And that foundation is what provides us the opportunity to share with you today. For generations, Grambling State University has led Louisiana in equipping and building the technology workforce. As I mentioned in our submitted testimony, Grambling State University has produced technology leaders since 1972. Partners with America's largest technology companies on talent development with IBM, CenturyLink, Microsoft, and many others. And we continue to lead Louisiana in producing African-American computer science and computer information system graduates. We are a small but mighty force along Interstate 20, which is fastly becoming the cyber corridor of North Louisiana. Our university's record-breaking enrollment growth, increases in fiscal health, and partnerships are helping create Louisiana's most educated generation in history. That generation includes students like Jared Richards. Jared is a senior in our computer science program who is a great example of how holistic investment in minority students produces expert talent in the fields of technology and cybersecurity. Today, we are able to help close the widening cybersecurity job gap by supporting students like Jared. During his time at Grambling State, there were a few semesters where he encountered a gap, as many of our students do, between the amount of aid and his cost to attend. And while Jared worked 3 jobs around campus, there were semesters when, without scholarships and grants, he may not have been able to continue his education. When Jared was looking for career experience, our partnership with CLECO, a local energy provider, was able to provide him his first hands-on experience with network security and preventing cyber threats. Those investments and the mentorship of his professor, Dr. Reddy, positioned Jared to finish this year with multiple internship offers and early conversations about full-time opportunities when he graduates this fall. He's just one example of how the collaboration between HBCUs and powerful partners can help companies, communities, and most importantly, students. I am excited to share that our Governor John Bel Edwards, our Board of Regents, our University of Louisiana System, and communities see our power and have selected our university to offer the state's first bachelor's degree in cybersecurity. We are honored to lead the next generation of Louisiana innovation and are excited to join this committee's historic discussion on how we can support our country. We thank you for this opportunity and look forward to answering any questions, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gallo. I now recognize Ms. Estwick to summarize her statement in 5 minutes.
Chairman Richmond. Thank you, Chairman Richmond and Ranking Member Katko, and esteemed members of the subcommittee. I am proud and honored to appear before you today to discuss the challenges for growing and diversifying the cyber talent pipeline. As the director of the National Cybersecurity Institute at Excelsior College, I will speak passionately on this topic from my perspectives as a Black woman, United States Army veteran, cybersecurity practitioner, computer science researcher, educator, and lifelong public servant. My career began in the early 1990s when I enlisted in the United States Army to work in the information security field. During the Gulf War, it became clear that safeguarding and protecting our data and resources was paramount to our national security. Since then, I've earned my bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees in computer science, thanks to earning a National Physical Science Consortium Fellowship that was sponsored by the National Security Agency while working as a civilian in the intelligence community. While 30 years has passed since my entry in the field, I still have that same sense of urgency. This is why I feel growing and diversifying the cyber talent pipeline is one of the most important workforce issues we address today. The recent executive order on America's cybersecurity workforce highlights some important programs that the federal government will explore in the near future. As we work collaboratively to address workforce needs, I would like to recommend a focus on continued support for initiatives that are already facilitating the growth and diversification of the cyber talent pipeline. For one, the importance of higher ed. The job market is changing rapidly, and occupations in multiple disciplines increasingly require technological ability, communication skills, and post-secondary degrees. Associate degrees are often great pathways to entry-level employment, and recent statistics state 40% of people who earn associate degrees go on to earn higher degrees. Working adults can leverage their compensation from work and tuition assistance benefits from employers to further their education, and online models like Excelsior College provide the flexibility required to continue education while working. Second thing is creating opportunities for current federal employees to earn academic credentials. According to a recent OPM profile of federal civilian non-postal employees, 51% of the federal workforce has a bachelor's degree or higher. In 2014, the OPM created the Federal Academic Alliance to provide higher education opportunities to federal workforce at reduced tuition rates to address the government-wide skills gap needs, including the shortages in cybersecurity. Today, OPM endorses 15 colleges and universities, such as Excelsior College, and support for more educational opportunities would be beneficial to the federal workforce. 3, fostering public and private partnerships. Cooperation of private industry, academia, and governmental agencies on joint cybersecurity initiatives can take advantage of each sector's complementary strengths. For example, through apprenticeships, internships, and work-study programs, students and employees can get firsthand experience with the cyber threats facing businesses, government, and nonprofits. Such experiences are particularly important for individuals seeking a career change to access the opportunities in cybersecurity. Also, providing employees with opportunities to cross-train will address the upskilling and reskilling needed for creating a pipeline of cybersecurity professionals. And lastly, addressing the K-12 cybersecurity education. As an educator and advocate for equity and inclusion in STEM and cybersecurity, my outreach activities often place me in communities with little awareness about how cybersecurity is applicable to their own lives. This troubles me because I know that we need to create sustainable STEM and cybersecurity programs that emphasize problem-solving, critical thinking, and effective communication skills. Programs to educate the K-12 ecosystem are important not only because there's a need to protect our digital infrastructure, but also because our youth represent the next generation of cybersecurity professionals. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Katko, and subcommittee members, in closing, to address the hundreds of thousands of jobs that are currently unfilled and will continue to grow unfilled as technology advances, the workforce will need to have the breadth and diversity of initiatives across multiple sectors to support the growth and diversity of the cyber talent pipeline. This pipeline can be sustained by recruiting, retaining, and advancing populations such as military and veterans with transferable skills, individuals from underrepresented groups to include Black, Latino, American Indian, Alaskan Natives, funding initiatives to support cybersecurity programs at minority-serving institutions, and support for advocacy groups whose focus on broadening participation within the cybersecurity field, such as Women in Cybersecurity and International Consortium of Minority Cybersecurity Professionals. Cybersecurity is a shared responsibility, and until we collaborate at all levels, to include local, state, and federal, we will continue to operate in silos with the same results in the demographic composition of our workforce. I thank the chairman and the ranking member in the subcommittee for this extraordinary opportunity in providing me with not only a seat at the table, but also a voice. I am looking forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your service. Let me apologize for calling you Mrs. Eswick as opposed to Dr. Eswick. It was well-earned, and I should make sure that I call you by that title. We're going to stand in recess until we go vote. We'll be back. Hopefully it's somewhere around 15 minutes on the worst side, maybe about 20, but it's government, so who knows? So we'll stand adjourned. In recess, I'm sorry.
Ranking Member Katko, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Candace Worley, Vice President and Chief Technical Strategist for McAfee, a device-to-cloud cybersecurity company. I'm pleased to address the subcommittee on the need to grow and diversify the cybersecurity talent pipeline. It goes without saying that every cybersecurity organization, including government, suffers from a shortage of cyber talent. No matter how committed we are to the cause of securing the digital world, we have to have enough people, we need to train enough people to fill these jobs. And it's not just about filling security roles. There's an economic element to the cybersecurity challenge. McAfee worked with CSIS in 2018 to refresh a study that we initially did in 2014 around the economics of cybercrime. That research showed that cybercrime is worth approximately $170 billion in GDP annually in North America, and between $400 and $600 billion globally. If we could recapture even half of that money back into the positive side of our economy, that would be a huge growth engine for North American economy as well as the global economy. We will not be able to do that unless we have cyber professionals available and in organizations to help secure both government and the private sector against those attacks. Today, I'll make 5 recommendations for addressing the cybersecurity talent shortage challenge. First, we must increase the Cyber Corps Scholarship for Service Program, SFS, which is administered through the National Science Foundation and provides grants to approximately 70 institutions across the country, enabling 10 to 12 students per institution to get those scholarships. After they graduate, these students go to work in the government for at least the same amount of time as they receive support in their education. And what we found is that they tend to remain in the federal government even longer. So this program is not only a great program for the student, it also enables the federal government to compete probably more readily with private industry for those employees. Because they're already employees of the federal government, they tend to stay longer. Since FY 2018, the program's funding has remained flat at $55 million annually, supporting these scholarships. That allows about 2,000 students to get scholarships. We're recommending that Congress should increase these funds to around $200 million annually, which would enable about 6,400 students to receive scholarships and continue to enable the federal government with cybersecurity talent. SFS should also be made available to more than just the current 70 land grant institutions. This stipulation is needlessly limiting if we really want to increase the talent pool. Second, we must expand the SF program to community colleges, where approximately 57% of students are women and 41% are minorities. Additionally, many individuals who are going back to retrain for a second or third year career choose a community college rather than a 4-year institution. That population has great experience that could be relevant in addition to a cybersecurity curriculum for filling open roles. Third, a strong cybersecurity operations requires different levels of skills. Not everyone needs a PhD or a computer science degree to work in a security operations center. We in industry and government should be considering our hiring requirements and opening those requirements up to people beyond those that just have a degree. For certificate and other training programs can do the job just as well for many of the positions that are open. In fact, we may also contemplate, are there opportunities for vocational programs to be developed? Fourth, to ensure we're coming up with the most creative solutions possible to address current and future cybersecurity challenges, we must focus on a diverse pipeline of talent. We need people with diverse perspectives and capabilities who can think critically about the cybersecurity problems. That talent pool should be diversified from many perspectives, certainly race, gender, experience, but also looking at people like gamers, veterans, retirees, who bring a unique set of experiences and capabilities to the discussion. Finally, we must develop creative approaches to enabling a public and private partnership, particularly during significant cybersecurity events where we need that collaboration in order to solve serious problems. We should design a mechanism for cyber professionals to move back and forth between the public and private sector so that government organizations would have a continual refresh of expertise. The executive order on America's cybersecurity workforce issued earlier this month is a good step in that direction. We also support widespread adoption of the cybersecurity workforce framework developed by the National Initiatives for Cybersecurity Education. At McAfee, we're walking the walk when it comes to implementing solutions to increase diversity and inclusion among our ranks. We achieved pay parity, making McAfee the first pure-play cybersecurity company to do so. To recruit diverse talent, we ensure job descriptions have inclusive language, and recruiters understand diversity and value-based interviewing as an integral part of our process. We also invest in enabling our employees to take time to train at local high schools and grade schools on an online safety program that we've developed targeting children so that they better understand the risks associated with the digital world. Feeding the pipeline with smart, talented, and diverse individuals is critical to developing and maintaining next-generation workforce that will defend American companies and the government from growing cyber threats. Thank you for your interest in this topic, and I'll be happy to answer questions as it proceeds.
I want to thank all the witnesses for their testimony, and I will remind each member that he or she will have 5 minutes to question the panel. I will recognize myself. I will yield it to Ms. Slotkin. Other than that, we may not have the time to get you in and out of here. So I will yield my time to Ms. Slotkin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm from Michigan, and in my district, we have this fantastic cyber security program at one of our local high schools. I went and visited there. So young people are literally starting to learn to code and to do all the sort of training for cybersecurity experts. They're being recruited straight out of college, right? Some of them are being asked to forego any higher education just because we're so desperate in Michigan for cybersecurity talent. Tell me what more we can be doing, particularly in rural areas, right? The high school I'm talking about is a rural school, and it's been a fantastic program for us. Tell me what I can do if I have rural schools who want their kids to go into this desperately needed job, but they just don't know where to look first.
Well, I guess I'll just jump in real quick. I think creating partnerships and pipelines within education is a key. One of the things that we do in Louisiana, we've got Bossier Parish Community College that provides an associate's degree. Grambling will have the bachelor's degree. Louisiana Tech, 5 miles down the road, has a master's program. So creating the pipeline from that high school to either a community or junior college and then to university, I think is something that has worked for us. And when you think about the support we provide at Cyber Innovation Center, Barksdale Air Force Base in Bossier City, and the other private companies in that area, I think creates a good pipeline and a diverse pipeline of cybersecurity workers.
Sure, I'll jump in here on this one. So there are a lot of great transitioning veteran programs out there. So there's a number of states that we currently work with at ISC Squared that we work with that are funded by the actual state for transitioning veterans. So there's programs already set up. They're already in place. They're very, very successful.
Sorry, just because I have a short time. Not to help the veterans when they get out, because I've certainly seen a lot, but to get them in, right? To get them in the uniformed military, to get them in the federal agencies, since cybersecurity is going to be the battlefield of the future. And we don't pay as much. I'm a former federal government employee. We don't pay as much as the private sector for a cybersecurity professional. What should we be doing in the federal government to incentivize getting people in rather than when they're done, helping them out?
Certainly on the topic of getting them into the federal government versus the services themselves, I think the SFS program is a great way to do that. I mean, continuing to fund that program to a greater degree where I give you 2 years of college, you give me 2 years of service in the federal government, right? Now you have them working in the federal government, they understand that mission, they get a feel for what it's like to work in government. We saw some stats that about 70% of those who go into the federal government in that program stay for at least a year longer. So I think the program that you currently have in place is actually serving that goal pretty well. On the front of military, I think that may be a more difficult challenge, but certainly I think this program is helping you at the federal level.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
No, that's okay. No, so I just wanted to add one thing about earlier when you talked about the K through 12. So I don't know if you're familiar with the NSA, National Security Agency, National Science Foundation Gen Cyber Program. That's a program that's been around for about, I want to say 5 to 6 years now. And they do K through 12 camps, student camps and teacher camps. And they award various organizations. You could be a nonprofit in schools. Excelsior College, we was actually awarded a grant last year, and we held a cybersecurity camp for middle and high school teachers in the New York State Capital Region. And what that does, they have goals in mind, of course, to increase interest in cybersecurity, but other goals, of course, is to diversify the workforce. And there is just a host of opportunities there for kids. The exposure is the thing, right? So you want to make sure you get as much exposure. Of course, there's cyber competitions as well, cyber patriot programs and things like that as well.
The gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Katko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to start with Ms. Worley, but actually this question applies to everybody. I think the National Science Foundation Cyber Core scholarships are a great place to start because they have a time commitment after they get the scholarship. Are any of you aware of any problems with implementing or getting enough professors involved or enough universities involved? Is anybody aware of any problems with that part of it?
So what I would say is that I see an increased number of educational institutions, certainly at both the university as well as the community college level, who are beginning to implement cybersecurity programs, either as an augmentation to existing computer science and engineering programs or as a pure cybersecurity program. So I'm certainly seeing increased interest and availability, but I'm sure other folks on the panel.
I guess my question is really focused at, there's requirements that go along with these programs, and some of the universities either aren't capable of reaching the requirements or have the desire to. Have any of you heard of that issue before, any of that problem?
I have not.
Dr. Estwick?
So I would say there's been a little bit of a bottleneck in getting faculty members to teach in cybersecurity.
Well, tell me about that.
For
Why?
us, we've been lucky enough to pull from private industry to have some adjunct faculty. But I would say across the board, as far as like computer science programs are having the same issues, actually. And a lot of the, like she said, cybersecurity is aligned and synergize a lot with the computer science program. So for now, yes, I think this is where private industry and those, of course, coming from the government can help step up and fill some of these faculty positions.
So that filling the faculty positions will help us utilize the program we have now, because I think it's a terrific idea, and I'm not speaking for the chairman, but I think he agrees that, well, actually, then I am speaking for him. We both think that plussing up this program would be a very good place to start. And we have to make sure that the universities are prepared to implement the program. So if there's changes that any of you think need to be done with the criteria so that we can make it more easy for these universities to get involved in these programs and get these kids these scholarships, please make sure you let us know, okay?
Yes.
Thank you very much. We've had a lot of testimony from all of you today. I just want to hear some kind of spitballing here. What other ways can we do that other than what you've heard? You've heard from Ms. Worley or the others. Is there something else, for example, Mr. Simpson or Mr. Gallant, that we can do to increase at the college level and get kids in? That's number one. And number two, if you want to add to it, do they always have to have a college? Do they have to have a college degree to do these programs? Because I think that they don't, and I would like to hear about that as well.
It's an excellent question. Thank you very much for asking. Let me first start for the first part of the question. I think if you're targeting college, you're too late. The majority of students choose their careers in high school. So in high school, we need to start sending that message of why cybersecurity is a great career and why they need to get into it. So when they go to college, if they choose to go to college, they can plant those curriculums and those degrees that align with that profession of cybersecurity that they want to get into. Not all people go to college, though, so we understand that. And that's the great relationship that academic colleges, as well as the certification and certificate organizations play, is that there's room for all of us and that there's no one way to get into cybersecurity. There's multiple ways to get in. People learn differently. There's nothing wrong with going through a hands-on technical program, certificate program, or certification program, or going through an advanced degrees. It just depends on that individual. The most important thing is that they're going into cybersecurity, and we help outline the different pathways in that journey map and that career map of how they can get into it.
Now the NSF scholarships, that applies strictly to universities, does it not? I mean, should it be expanded to apply also to certificate programs as a way of incentivizing kids to get into it?
For us, absolutely. So when you look at how people are getting into cybersecurity, whether it's through certificates, certifications, or through education, scholarships play a huge path for that, and especially for those folks that can't afford it. You start looking at some of these demographics in these areas, and these individuals, they can't afford to go to college. They can't even afford some of these certifications. The more we can infuse these programs of being able to cast a wider net and apply to a greater amount of students, that's how you're going to help with it, some of that inflow.
Go ahead, Mr. Gallant.
And thank you, Mr. Caddo, for that
By the way, I absolutely love your band at that university. Every time I see them on TV, I just stop what I'm doing and watch them. They just ooze talent and confidence and fun. It's just a blast to watch them.
Well, thank you
it's
so
worth.
much. And we have a number of computer science graduates, computer science students in the band as well.
bet.
You know, quite honestly, it's difficult enough for minority candidates in applying for jobs, and for our graduates, I think they're better prepared both from a knowledge base, but also a maturity base when they're going to either government or the private sector applying for jobs. And so for a black student who's going and applying for a job, I think he or she stands a better chance of being seriously considered for that job if they have a degree. And that's part of the reality of the environment that we live in. So certainly I respect the fact that we have different entry points for different individuals, and Ms. Worley, I think, did an excellent job of talking about the different needs that can be fit by some who have college degrees or not. But our society now, I think, requires the students that I serve, they are much better prepared to go in and actually land that job with a degree as opposed to not having it.
All right, thank you very much. And lastly, I'll just note, Mr. Chairman, perhaps we should consider when we're looking at the funding for the Cyber Corps to make it more widespread for certificate schools, but also at the high school level. So if kids want to take college courses in high schools, might be able to have scholarship opportunities available for them. Then that gets them into the pipeline before they're out of high school. I yield back.
Gentleman from New York yields back. Now we'll have the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for holding this hearing, and I want to thank our witnesses for your testimony. You've all had important things to say about the cyber workforce, something that I have been worried about for quite some time, and this is an issue that I've been working on now for more than a decade. And we often hear about the challenges in cyber, and how does for example, the federal government compete and attract and also retain people with the right cyber skills. And I think that's the wrong focus to say how do we compete per se. It's really about how do we grow the pie. And so that's what we really need to focus on, so that we're not trying to compete with or take from the private sector, but again, we're growing the size of the pie so that there are more people available to fill these jobs that are necessary. There are hundreds of thousands of cybersecurity jobs right now that go unfilled every year. That number is going to grow exponentially. We're probably looking into the millions several years out as the cybersecurity challenges continue to grow. So, Mr. Simpson, I think you had some important things to say too about getting how do we attract the kids at even younger ages and start thinking about a job in this field. Certainly, I support the the Scholarship for Service program. I led a letter to appropriators again this year asking for increased funding for the Scholarship for Service programs. I think CyberCorps is a wonderful program, and anything we can do to grow or replicate those types of programs, we need to do that. How do we create a program that speaks to the kids at the high school level so that they are thinking about that as a career? I think that we need a sort of a program model on the Scholarship for Service program that we're reaching out to kids that are in college already. Now we kind of replicate that. We start talking to kids at maybe the freshman, sophomore year, and saying in the junior year, and they're getting ready to go off to college, that you go into a cybersecurity field and a Scholarship for Service type program, your college and your freshman and sophomore year will be paid for in the similar way, perhaps, that the junior and senior year would be paid for if you're in the Scholarship for Service program. So have you thought about those types of things, how we can partner with the private sector and the federal government can go in that direction so that kids, as they're thinking about a career in cyber, or get them to think about a career in cyber, and they're starting to think about it in their high school years?
Yes, thank you for your question, sir. It all starts with the awareness to the individual. So the kids today, they're not aware. When you look at the amount of Gen X and baby boomers that are about to retire over the next 5 to 10 years, there's not a wave of Army that's coming over to help backfill them. So we've got to get into the school systems at a much early learning area to start to teach them. And you've got to do that through investment. Invest into the students, invest into the learnings. So on the back end, as they're going through middle school and high school, they're already aware, they've already got curriculum that's been put in there by the state into the schools. The broader that net that you can get across all the schools within each state's district is going to start to yield that value as they transition, whether they go on to college, into a cyber career, whether it's through STEAM, but bringing that exposure at the high, you start to plant those seeds, and it's got to be done through investment into those school systems, into the children.
Yeah, I think excuse me, Mr. Congressman. I think there's another opportunity, and that is, I think we often forget that high school kids are probably as digitally savvy as most four-year graduates were 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, they're digital natives. They can code at, junior high, maybe earlier in many cases. And so there's probably an opportunity where government and private industry could partner together around internships at the high school level. Often internships are something that's reserved for college, right? You get an internship once you get to college. If we've got savvy high school students who are very capable, from a cyber perspective, we should be looking at how we can partner together from a private and public perspective to create internship programs for those high school students. You get them into a research facility with a bunch of cyber tech researchers, believe me, they're going to get excited about this field, right? I mean, when they start looking at what they'll get to do and the implications of that, we'll get them excited. But I think there's an opportunity for us to partner that way.
And I know my time has expired, but you're right. You're right on point, and when they can do more hands-on learning, I think that's the better. So I agree also with what you had to say. It's not necessarily that you need a PhD right away to start going to a cyber field. We also need to include certification programs so that they can get the entry-level jobs in cybersecurity, even as they pursue other academic opportunities in either a junior college or a four-year degree. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I could go on and on, but my time is gone. I'll yield back.
The gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Langevin, yields back. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Taylor, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate being here. So just to kind of expand on, so as I understand the current program, it's at 68 four-year universities, so it's for a four-year college degree, right? Is that basically how it works now? And so, and I just going back to saying, we need more children to learn in high school. Some of these, they need an associate's degree, maybe some community college, maybe some PhD. Is it a program that we should expand out in terms of, being thoughtful that, hey, sometimes it takes a PhD, sometimes it takes a college degree, sometimes it takes an associate's degree, sometimes it just takes a really sharp high school kid that's actually had 1 year of coding in high school, so that we're really looking at this on kind of a holistic level, because it's not just one entry point, like, hey, this is the only thing you need. Like, we don't need any PhDs, we don't need an associate. Am I thinking about that right, and just expanding this out? Ms. Worley, since you're...
Mr. Congressman, I guess part of what I'm here to talk about in terms of creating a diverse pipeline of cyber talent, and I think more globally, I think you make an excellent point, but specifically, what is that barrier that stands between this minority student and the cyber workforce, and how do we bridge that gap, which I think is the part that we have to, and if you look at, again, the students that we typically serve, many of them are still first-generation college students, and trust me, they find a way to figure it out. Not everybody graduates from Morehouse and gets their student loans paid off. Some of our students, actually work 3 jobs and figure out, like Jared Richards did, how to be, an A and B student and get closer to that degree. So I think part of it is resource and capacity to give us the opportunity to open this up to the students and the workforce that I think the committee is here to talk about and address, and that is, how do we provide more access and resources, either through NSF or other agencies that you all have that give us more capacity to provide access to the diversity that I think everyone is looking for.
But Ms. Worley, just going to you as an employer, right? So you're employing, in my district, but also around the country, many thousands of people that are in this space. I mean, as we discussed before, you're hiring PhDs and college graduates and associates. You're hiring all levels, right? Is that a fair statement?
In fact, there's a number of engineers in the office that I work in that do not have a college degree, but they are brilliant coders.
Right.
And so, I fundamentally believe in education. I worked my way through college as well. I paid for both my undergrad and my graduate degree. Cocktail waitressing, cooking, whatever it took. So I understand that 4-year degree and the importance of that. But there's also a population in our workforce today that maybe has, 20 years of experience in a job doing data analysis, but they've never worked in cybersecurity. But believe me, that data analysis experience they have would be outstanding as an incident responder in a cybersecurity operations center. We need to look at the requirements, not just the hard-coded requirements of working in cybersecurity. What are the skill sets we need? Critical thinking, problem-solving, analytics that apply, and then create programs, whether those are through certification programs, vocational programs, a community college program, that allow them to take the skills they already have and translate them into the language of cybersecurity. And that doesn't necessarily take the 4-year degree. If I'm fresh out of high school, that 4-year degree probably is going to be really important. If I'm an experienced person, maybe less important.
Sure, and I know in my own state of Texas, we're at about 24% of our population is a 4-year college degree. We're trying to get to the national average, which is 27%. And in that effort, we're actually not leaving anybody behind. We've implemented a 60-30 plan to try to get 60% of the population by 2030 to have some kind of post-high school degree or certification, right? Whether it's a welding certificate or an associate's degree or a 4-year college degree. But it seems that in this space, the requirements are such that if you focus only on the college degree, you're missing key pieces under and below that you've got to have in order to have an effective workforce.
Furthermore, given where we stand right now, if we rely solely on 4-year degrees, we will never catch up. We have to look at creative ways to educate people with experience, to educate people with core capabilities in this space. And we still need lots of college graduates. There's no doubt of that, because if you start looking at things like data science around artificial intelligence, that requires education. But we should not bypass a lot of those other individuals that have core capabilities relevant to this field because they simply don't have a degree. We should enable them to move forward into the field.
Right, and I should point out that, an associate's degree can be on the way to getting a college degree, right? So that you encourage someone to get an associate's degree, they work for a couple of years, they say, you know what, I'm going to go back, I'm going to finish up my bachelor's degree.
Absolutely.
I'm out of time. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Taylor, yields back. The gentlewoman from New York, Mrs. Rice, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. What I'm hearing here today is very encouraging. And I think that what I would love for the chairman and the ranking member on this committee to do is to put together all of these parts, right? We have educators, we have the private sector who needs to employ people, and we have the government that has a vested interest in educating and training a workforce for the future. And I think people fall into two categories. You have those heading into college or who are already in college. I was just at my nephew's graduation at Catholic University, my alma mater, and I said, thank God he went into business because maybe he has a chance of getting a job when he graduates. So we have that whole universe. How do we get qualified teachers at the high school level? Maybe, I'm just gonna throw a bunch of questions out and then whomever thinks they can answer them, but we need to have faculty in high schools, grammar schools and high schools that are up to date on IT issues and cyber issues so we can get kids interested at a high school level. And I think that's where you increase the chances of diversity going forward. But we also have a large number of people in this country who got a degree that maybe cannot help them get a job. I mean, every time you talk to people who are based in Silicon Valley, they say we have millions of jobs that we cannot fill because we do not have a trained workforce in this country. So do we partner together? There are three legs to this stool. We need educators, we need the government, and we need private business. Everyone has a vested interest in coming up with a system that will work. Now, the reason why I think it's important to go in at a high school level is because there is still out there that sentiment that I need to get a 4-year degree. No offense to anyone who heads universities that offer 4-year degrees. That's not true. Maybe an associate's degree is okay. Maybe you just need to go to vocational training. But there still seems to me to be somewhat of a stigma around not going and getting a 4-year degree when we have all these kids who are graduating with crushing student loans that is ultimately going to become the taxpayer problem, right? So here's one question. How do we ensure that we get a faculty in high school who can actually begin to get these young kids interested in these sciences, technologies, AI, whatever it is? And how do we address the issue of there being a stigma to maybe just going and getting vocational education that, by the way, now you can end up making more money than someone who graduates with a 4-year degree. So it's just a lot of stream of consciousness, but literally I was just sitting with my nephew and I thought, thank God he has a job, but there are how many of his classmates don't, and they've got these crushing student loans. And so anyone who has any thoughts on that?
Congresswoman, thank you for those questions. I really would like to jump in and say this because I feel passionately, just like you, about our educators. Educators are our force multipliers, right? And what we're doing is, I feel like we're teaching our students, like who are digitally natives, right?
Yeah.
Digital natives, and they're surpassing the teachers. We have communities where you may not know this, but the teachers share, a lot of the educators share this. You know, students are going in and changing their grades, right? Because they know how to hack the systems and they know how to compromise weaknesses, right, in the network. So they already have that capacity and that intellectual curiosity where our educators are sitting there trying to keep up.
Yeah.
So I think programs that are focused around trying to help our educators so they can feel empowered to then be a force multiplier and explain cybersecurity jobs, not in the form of the cool stuff, what they see in Hollywood and hacking, right? But also things to protect our national security, right?
What's the biggest obstacle to getting that workforce that is ahead of young kids who, you know, as you say, are better than any of us?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think there are programs, and I can't stress this enough because Gen Cyber is such a major program that I don't think it gets funded enough, to tell you the truth. This is a national program that's been around for about 5-6 years, and they host camps, cybersecurity camps, and they teach the fundamentals. And they come out of, the budget comes out of, I believe, National Security Agency, National Science Foundation. But what it is that about 130 camps were awarded this year. And the camps are there. They have teacher camps, student camps, and a combination sometimes of teachers and students. So you have kind of train-the-trainer effect. So last year when we hosted, Excelsior College, we hosted and was awarded a grant to host a middle and high school cybersecurity camp. We provided them with tools, mini computers, we call them Raspberry Pis. We taught them lessons, so now they are taking that, and our teachers were diverse. They weren't just, a comp sci or biology or STEM teachers. We had librarians, because they are now the house, they are the custodians of the technology sometimes in the high schools and in the schools. So we had librarians, we had our technical teachers who do the vocational training, and we had various disciplines in the camp, about 30 educators in there, and just teaching them and providing them with the curricula so they're able to, again, then train their teachers, and then that kind of replicates throughout the system. But naturally, these programs need to be supported to expand.
I'd like to add, we have at Grambling several summer programs. We have one high ability program for rising juniors. So they come to the campus, essentially are college students for this summer program. We could have 10 times the number of students that we have if we had the resources to fund that program. We also have computer camps. We have STEM camps. We're joining a partnership with Dr. Calvin Mackey from New Orleans, which is STEM NOLA. We're making it STEM Grambling. There are a lot of, we have the ability to do a lot more if we had resources. And I would say that, what Mr. Walker and Senator Scott are doing every year with the HBCU fly-in, it gives HBCU presidents a platform to interact with agency heads, with industry at the request of members of Congress. So using your platform to connect us with the resources both in your respective agencies that you oversee, as well as the businesses who are always looking to have a relationship with you, to put them in the room with us. So I thank Mr. Walker and Senator Scott for what they've done for the past 3 years in giving us a forum to develop these relationships, and we see greater capacity, but we could do even more if we had greater resources.
Well, it's clear that all of us are aware in this room that we're all in this together, and I think we just need to kind of get in the same room and figure out how we do this. So thank you all, and I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlewoman from New York. I'll now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, President Gallo, for those kind words. It was great to see you again this past February. Of course, I won't talk any North Carolina A&T shade, even though obviously I get to represent the great university. And as you know, my wife went to Winston-Salem State University, so that whole Aggie Pride ram, and I can tell Mr. Morehouse is over there looking down at me already, but we'll leave that alone for today. But I do appreciate your commitment in helping these young students succeed in all aspects of life. Read through a little bit of your testimony. It is apparent that Grambling State is becoming a leader, already a leader, and even expanding that in cybersecurity education efforts. Can you describe how Grambling State began its partnership with the IT companies?
Graduating qualified members of the workforce. I think, showing that we are graduating not only 40% of the African-American graduates in the state of Louisiana in computer science and CIS, but those who can actually come in on day one and make a difference, even with our interns. And I highlighted earlier one of our students who did an internship at Electric Utility, who came in and his supervisors complimented him on being prepared to come in and do meaningful work as an intern, as opposed to just fetching coffee or doing something menial. So I think the quality of our graduates is what has opened the doors to many of the relationships that we currently have.
I don't want to be too technical. If it is, take a pass on this, but I'd like to kind of dig a little bit deeper. Can you describe the difference between a cybersecurity course versus a computer science course?
I defer.
Okay.
I could read the curriculum, and of course there are foundations of cybersecurity there.
Sure.
And there's the technical aspect of it, of the what to do, but there's also the why, and so there's the ethics around it all. Of
Exactly.
course, so that is it's a holistic approach that we're taking with our new program. But I would certainly defer to.
Well, and I would have to as well. I get to read the questions sometimes with good staff work, just to be honest with you here on some of the dig the thing out. If I can be honest with you here for a second, let me do a follow-up. Maybe this helps. A 2016 study showed that only one of the top 36 computer science program required any cybersecurity course to graduate. Do you think that more schools, and I'll open this up, I won't pick on President Gallo, do you think that more schools should include cybersecurity components in these computer science programs?
So I'll jump in here real quick. So I actually think it should be it should go further beyond computer science. I think it should be part of Common Core. When we look at cybersecurity, this is an epidemic issue that that we're going through globally. And if we don't start getting out the education and awareness and building this into our school systems, it's just going to continue to grow. Typically, we just go after the STEM candidates, the science, the technology, as well as engineering and math. We need to go broader than that. We need to really get into the STEAM, which brings in the arts. Cybersecurity should be part of at least a course in all degrees, because when we look at how we're going to solve this, especially in the workplace, it's not just the cybersecurity team, it's everybody. It's all the employees need to know what their hand is and how they're going to be able to help.
Ms. Worley, go ahead.
May I?
Yes, of course.
Yes, thank you, Congressman. So I think it absolutely has to be part of core curriculum. I agree with Mr. Simpson in that as we contemplate the Internet of Things and the continued digitization of everything that we live with in our world today, enabling students who are going to be designing, whether that's designing software, designing hardware, et cetera, to be designing with security in mind from the beginning, from architecture and development, is absolutely critical to the security of everything that we use at home, in our companies, and in government. And enabling them with the basic tenets of cybersecurity, whether they're going to be a software coder or a hardware developer or a cybersecurity expert, is absolutely fundamental to ensuring kind of a secure digital ecosystem as we move forward.
I'm glad to hear that. As ranking member on counterintelligence and terrorism on this specific subcommittee of Committee on Homeland Security, I can tell you the Chinese try to hit us 20,000 times a day, Russia as well. We need strong young people that are coming into this environment that can speak this language, for lack of a better expression there. And I think that is crucial. One survey found that only 37% of students said that a teacher discussed with them cybersecurity as a career option, with a contributing factor possibly being the lack of skilled teacher. How do you change that factor? Because you can only educate for people that you have from the educators down to the students. Somebody want to address that? My time's expiring with that question. So. Dr. Eswick, you want to take a look at that?
Right, so thank you for that question, Congressman. So you're talking about as far as how do we get cybersecurity and computer science in conjunction, and also how do we get teachers, I think,
Yes,
educators,
yes.
right? So I think the thing is that there's work that is being done, and looking at the Common Core standards. We talk about this all the time, about the standardization, right? And looking at how we're already infusing computer science into the curricula, as well as synergies between that and infusing the cybersecurity components. But I have to tell you, sir, without question, we are playing catch up. Right? So we have educators who are trying to wrap their heads around the standards as it is, and then we have a hodgepodge of standards, as you know, nationally, right? So some states are a little bit more mature than others, and when you look at the standards, I'm gonna reach out there and say like New York, because our school is based in New York, so I know a little bit about their standards, and I'm on the K through 12 subgroup through NIST actually, that's trying to synergize between computer science and cybersecurity. You'll see that there's a lot of commonality, but you'll also see that those tenets that we talked about, that's part of cybersecurity, educators need to be educated on that as well. So it's not just a curricula for the students, it's also a curricula for the educators who are trying to be the force multipliers in the classroom.
Thank you, panel. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Gentleman from North Carolina yields back. I'll recognize myself for a round of questions. Let me go back and just start kind of at the basic, and I'll start with you, Dr. Eswick. And based on your experience in the Army, National Security Agency, now academia, how important is it for federal agencies, national security agencies, intelligence agencies with those missions, like DHS, FBI, DOD, to have a diverse cyber workforce. And so I guess the ultimate question is, do you think that having a lack of a diverse workforce actually creates inherent blind spots in our security?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question. And I feel that, there's been already studies out that the importance of diversity in the workforce, and especially I would feel in the cybersecurity and in the national security framework, diverse perspectives are important. For my experience, I feel that there's certain ways and experiences I bring to the table that other people just don't have. And having a multitude of people around you with all those different perspectives we're able to see different areas of a problem. And I think for me, working 10 years in cyber operations, there were different avenues that I was able to identify ways that maybe we, can get ahead of the adversary and not be so prone to always be on the defensive side and playing whack-a-mole, frankly, when we're trying to protect our resources. So I think it's important that diversity we know is a business problem, right? We know diversity needs to be focused and brought to the table, but I think it's also that we talk about diversity a lot in conversations, and it's a little frustrating for me sometimes because we talk a lot about it, but I don't see it in action, unfortunately. And what that means is there needs to be some entrenched issues that need to be addressed. And with some of that could be not just mentoring, but also with sponsorships. So how do we bring people through the different grade levels so they're able to be a part of problem sets and be a part of the overall solutions to how do we address diversity and again, protect our national security.
Thank you. Let me ask Mr. Gallo. We've talked about the Cyber Corps Scholarship for Service, which it appears that everybody up here supports. And I would assume, Ms. Worley, you would tell me that if we doubled it, you think everybody would use the money and continue to create more of a pipeline. But besides the Cyber Corps Scholarship for Service, what about programs like DHS or NSA, Centers for Academic Excellence? How can they better partner with you? What else should we be asking them to do to help create that diverse pipeline, maybe partnering with HBCUs or other minority-serving institutions?
Well, I think part of the solution is providing additional support resources, and I'm not just talking about writing a check, but when you think about our shop, for instance, our sponsored program director, Dr. Walton, is also serving as our provost. And so her ability and time to, although she's increased our research grants by 254% in the last 2 years, there's so much more that could be done if there were more workers in her shop to help us connect with those resources. So having an agency like DHS to provide a resource person to connect us with with those opportunities, I think is something tangible that would assist us. And again, it's not about just writing a check, it's about giving us some help to build our capacity to compete for these opportunities.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the professor, and I think about people like Calvin Mackey, Stem Nola, and you all partnering. The question is, how long will we keep them in the public service sector before the corporations who need people who have deeper pockets come along? So, how hard is it to retain department chairs and professors? Because if you're talking about a 489,000 person shortage in the country, at some point they're going to go start picking off our professors to work in the high-paying jobs, and then all of a sudden, who's training the next generation? So do you see a problem with retaining and recruitment, and Dr. Estwick, you also, but do you all see a problem in the future with retaining the talent that's teaching the next generation of cybersecurity talent, and how can we help you all keep them in academia as opposed to going off into the private sector by Ms. Worley and making a whole lot of money?
Mr. Chairman, I think if you all as Congress can incentivize the private sector to better partner with us, I think would certainly be a good start. They certainly want to know how they can continue to do business with you, and if their contracting documents require a certain level of partnership with academia, I think that incentivizes them to be a better partner with us because you're requiring them to do it as a part of doing business with you. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Dr. Eswick?
Yes, I can also add, thank you, Chairman, for the question. I can also add that I think in the executive order, they spoke about rotational assignments. And I think it's important to have kind of that cross-pollination, right? So you have folks, and again, incentivize this program, but being able to have private industry go into government, government go into private industry, academia, and just have this continuous cross-pollination of information, of experiences, of expertise, I think would be important too. So when we talk about this in the framework of the executive order and the rotational assignments, I would like to see that really expanded to include not just the government, but also with private industry and the academic communities as well.
Oh, I see that my time has expired, so I will yield back. Before I close the hearing, I will recognize Mr. Katko for additional time.
Yeah, there's no question. I just want to make a brief observation based on all the excellent questions and input from the panel today, and that is my experience with a program called PTAC in high schools. I'm not sure many of you have heard of it, but what it does, it's kind of come out of an outgrowth of a need in the STEM fields, electrical engineering and all those types of things. But also in some of the rural areas, it's a way of getting people into the building trades. And what they do is they marry up the industry with the kids in high school, in an earlier level, 8th, 9th grade, and they get them into college level courses, but also give them practical experience. And they're being taught oftentimes, at least at a guest lecture and sometimes in the classroom setting, by members from the industry. And so by the time you get out of high school, they have a lot of college credits. They have a career goal, and they know what they're doing. And oftentimes, these are first-generation kids going to college. And it's working everywhere it goes. So all the talent in the industry, you want to talk, Mr. Gall, about bridging the gap, right, and having government help augment things. Industry can augment government by getting their people out into the field and reaching to these kids at these early levels in a PTAC type program. You could do that all over the country, and I think would have a huge effect as well. And then you couple that up with the scholarships and us plussing up the scholarships, you might really start having a force multiplier that we haven't seen before. But getting industry, not just looking for talent, getting them out into the field to help cultivate that talent would be a very big thing. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I ask unanimous consent to submit a statement for the record from New America. Hearing no objections, so ordered.
Sure. Yeah, okay, it's okay. It's up to you. You don't have to.
We're trying to give one of our colleagues a moment to get here, and I think that she would add valuable insight into the conversation. But let me just also add that we really need to find better ways to fund, especially our Cyber Core Scholarship Program. And the fact that I believe every year in the budget, it's identified as something that would and should be cut. And I'm sure that it's very hard to have a strategic plan if you don't know if that funding's going to be there on a yearly basis. And maybe we ought to look at some long-term funding for it, or making sure that we know it's there so that you can plan accordingly. Now, Mr. Gallo, I guess when I was coming up in high school, we had Upward Bound and all those programs where kids could go to college and get introduced to biology and all those pre-med, and not that I got into any of the Upward Bound programs, but I certainly knew that they were there. So is that what you all are doing in terms of cyber and computer information systems, and at what grade do you start?
So those we don't have TRIO or Upward Bound. Southern University, of course, in Baton Rouge has that. Ours are self-supported programs, our high ability program, again, for rising juniors who are able to come and earn college credit on a college campus, as well as we have a coding camp, we have a robotics camp.
How do you pay for all that?
Mainly, we absorb the cost or through some grant opportunities, but for the most part, we absorb the cost because, again, a lot of the students we serve lack the resources to pay for that. And of course, with our partnership with Dr. Mackey and STEM Grambling, that's going to provide us additional opportunities. Entergy, for instance, has been a great partner of his program, and so we look to utilize those as well. But again, we have the ability and the know-how to do it. It's just simply a matter of having expanded resources to expand our capacity to reach these kids who are really very hungry, and they're like sponges. I mean, they soak it up very quickly. You just have to give them an environment to do it. And I think about my 6 and 7-year-olds who are using iPads in kindergarten and first grade. And so these kids growing up now are way more technologically advanced than we ever were, and they pick up on this stuff. Again, we just need more capacity and resources, and we can certainly do a better job.
Now, are there any government programs or grants out there for the universities to help you augment or offset those costs for those programs, or is that something you'd like to see us look at creating?
We'd certainly welcome the opportunity.
Okay. With that, I want to thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the committee may have additional questions for the witnesses, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. Without objection, the committee record shall be kept open for 10 days. Hearing no further business, the committee stands adjourned. Thank you.